This is the Barry-Roubaix Gravel Race 2024. This weekend we're off to the middle of Michigan, about 5 hours away from home, and for some reason it's way greener. This weekend I'm racing with my team Ascent Cycling, the red and blue kit you can see here, and we do have one imposter among us. So here's the squad. First up we have Connor, the team's gravel god. He actually got third at this race last year. Next up we have Jeremy, the team's veteran and official climby boy. Don't challenge him to a race uphill. Then we have Jeremy too, the American, and like me, he's a rookie. And then we have our imposter, Strat, a converted triathlete turned gravel lover. And then there's me, Craig, who's just looking for the next great adventure. We all showed up Friday a little early so that we could pre-ride some of the course. We were racing 60 miles, so about 100 kilometers. This was not the longest race, but it did have the most prize money. And that matters to Connor. A lot. On our pre-ride, we wanted to ride the three main technical sections of the course. First up came Shaw at 17 kilometers into the race, and this one was going to be important because we were going to be in a really big group going into it, and I don't want to get stuck behind anyone. Next at 30 kilometers was Sager. The first two were pretty sandy with a bit of ruts, but nothing too crazy. And then the last one at 40k, we biked through a summer camp that was mostly grass and winding trail. After these three sections, it's mostly just dirt and paved roads all the way back to Hastings. We had 1,000 people in our race, so we had to get to the line early to avoid getting stuck in a traffic jam as everyone starts. I showed up 30 minutes early but was still about 100 riders back with Jeremy and Jeremy too. We ended up waiting there so long that this kid beside us was playing games on his phone. After half an hour waiting, a pee break, a little bit of hail, we were off. Jeremy's advice was to follow Connor, so I was just trying to weasel my way up and find him. Everything was pretty calm while we were on the road, but once we hit the first dirt section, things started to spice up. I saw a kid beside me blow up his chain and end his race in the first 5 minutes. I wanted to stay out of that chaos, so I tried to stay as far forward as I can without pushing my own win. About a kilometer from the Shaw Road sector, Connor and I got to the front. It was well worth doing a little bit of extra effort to stay near the front and not get stuck behind someone. Just as the road started to narrow, Connor and I were in perfect position, P4 and P5, not too far up, not too far back. At some point, Connor decided to take the right line, and that's when we started to pass people. I somehow ended up at the front, but that was kind of nice because I was able to see the road ahead, and honestly, the draft didn't really matter that much at this point. Here we're coming up on the sandiest part of the sector, and I actually had a lady walking in my lane. I yelled ahead and she was awesome, moved out of the way. Now I ended up riding that sand section pretty well, and I ended up coming out with more speed than the guy beside me. By the time I got to the top of this little hill, I looked back and I had a 50-meter gap on everybody else. So I ended up keeping a steady pace and came out of the sector still first with Connor right behind. Shaw Road complete. As soon as we got on the road, Connor came around me and set a hard pace up the hill. Here we formed the lead group of 8. I wasn't expecting to be at the front of the race, but I honestly raced really well for the first 20 kilometers. My main goal for today was to get a really hard workout. My big events this year come in August through October, so I'm still 4 to 6 months away from peak fitness. For the next 10 kilometers, we all worked pretty well, and I was able to hit the start of Sager Road in first position. But I think that was a mistake. I wanted to be in first position because I've been riding these off-road sections really well and I didn't want to get stuck behind anyone, especially with all the 100-mile riders we were passing. Thing is, I misjudged how far away Sager Road was. I jumped to the front at 1 kilometer and pulled the whole group all the way there. And honestly, it didn't wear me out that much, but when you're racing against strong riders, it wasn't efficient and it just wore me out for later on in the race. Connor and Brody, who low-key won the Brightest Kid of the Day award, took a much better line through this sand and got an instant 20-meter gap. I just kept going my pace, but in retrospect, since I was at the front, I should have tried to slow down a smidge to help Connor build his advantage. As the sector went on, I ended up getting a small gap on the guys behind me, and I ended up coming out of that sector in no man's land with Connor and Brody 100 meters ahead and the rest of the group about 100 meters behind. I really regret what I did next. I ended up putting the power down, trying to chase down Connor and Brody, but it was no use and I ended up getting caught by the group. And this useless effort burned one of my matches. Now at this point, I'm really hurting. Connor and Brody are still up the road, and we come downhill fast and do a left-hand turn, and some guys just let the wheel go. And the 2 teammates in blue went off chasing Connor and Brody. Now I did one cycle to help catch the 2 guys in blue, but then I did the stupidest thing all race. Once I got to the front, they were close, but not really that close, and I decided to do a last-ditch effort to catch up to them, and that was dumb. It hurt. I went nowhere. Yeah. It didn't take long and everybody came back together, just in time for the punchiest hill of the race. I went pretty hard. I thought this might have been a pivotal section of the race, but no one really went. I followed Brody's wheel, and we got to the top. Connor gave me some words of encouragement because I'm sure it looked like I was suffering. Over the hill, we were all grouped up and we worked well together all the way to the third technical section, the campground. This is the one I was the least worried about. At this point, there was no one in front of us on the road to get in the way, and we were a small group of 8. Connor set a good pace and led us through the entire section. Connor must have been feeling good because he even had the energy for a little trick. Looking back at the footage, there were some little gaps that opened up, but nothing big enough to separate the group. This segment went by really fast, and before I know it, I was coming out the other side, intact with the group. Now at this point, we're done all 3 technical sections, but we still have 50 kilometers to the finish. And full disclosure, I'm suffering. I almost got dropped somewhere between sections 2 and 3. I was like 100 meters off the back, but I noticed I was cornering a lot better than others, so I told myself, Craig, go, 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 hit this corner hard, see if you can catch on, and you know what? I did. If I hadn't caught on in that corner, who knows, I might have been dropped 15 kilometers ago. Now here comes the most pivotal part in my race. I had just done a pull on the front, but then I see we have a right-hand turn coming up, so I slotted in behind this turbo rider. Coming up the hill, he puts in a good dig, and this hurt me. I tried to follow, but I just did not have the legs. Prepare yourself, because what you're about to see next is really sad. Watching this back, I swear it happens in slow motion, but everyone is about to come around me. I'm trying to catch on, but I just do not have the legs today. And then I watched as the group faded into the distance. It wasn't like my legs just blew up and stopped working. I felt good when going a steady pace, but I had no punch, no oomph, no acceleration. So I just kept putting away at my pace. Here's a section for the Strava nerds. When I looked back on my power data, I was actually pretty happy. I ended up averaging 339 watts for the first hour and 50 minutes, and I didn't give up when I was dropped. I still held 275 watts until the end of the race. All these fancy numbers mean that I set a personal best from the 1 hour all the way to the 3 hour mark, so that's something to be pretty proud of, even if I can't compete for the win. Dumping my massive bucket of excuses aside, the best rider on the day won. I've really learned a lot from watching my videos back. I had no idea how much time I was spending at the front pushing my own wind. Not really that efficient. Moving on, I was putting away in no man's land, and after 15 kilometers I ended up getting caught by the chase group, but sadly, no other Ascent riders. This might be silly, but I was at the front of the chase group still pulling. At this point I found myself lacking the desire for a really good race result, and rather I just wanted to keep a good workout going. After about 5 or 10 kilometers with the chase group, we came to a hill and my legs cramped and I just popped off again. That's drop number 2. It was a battle just to keep the legs spinning towards the finish. With 400 meters to go, I looked over my shoulder and I saw Jeremy closing down on me at full speed. I went to go sprint, but full cramped up and he caught up to me. We ended up finishing together in 29th and 30th place. Connor battled for the win and ended up finishing 6th overall. Strat and Jeremy 2 were shortly behind me, with Jeremy 2 taking 4th overall in his age group. After warming up in our cars, we hit up the after party and podiums. Overall, this was a really well done event with a great vibe, and I highly recommend it to anyone looking for an early season gravel ride. Thanks for watching right to the end. If you enjoyed this race recap, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. I have a ton more race and adventure videos in the works, so we'll see you in the next one.